For years we were told canned tuna was the safest cheap meal in America. Open a can, mix it with mayo, and you never had to think twice. But that story is a lie. In September 2025, the FDA is pulling cans off shelves for botulism risks that can paralyze your lungs and kill you without a single warning sign. The same brands we trusted for decades have been caught fixing prices, filling cans with scraps, and hiding behind shiny labels that scream premium while serving you mush that smells like cat food. Some of these companies knew their packaging was defective and let it slide because profit mattered more than your safety. Think about that the next time you reach into your pantry. That innocent-looking can could be the reason you end up in an ER struggling to breathe. The question is simple. Do you really know what you're feeding yourself and your family? Top 1. Genova, Van Camp's, Trader Joe's, Tri-Union Seafoods. Let's start with the one that shocked everyone this summer. Genova, Van Camp's, and yes, even Trader Joe's. If you shop at Walmart, Target, or Trader Joe's, chances are you've seen these cans lined up neatly on the shelf, promising something fancy. Mediterranean style, packed in olive oil, shiny labels that look like they came straight out of a European kitchen. For years, people grabbed them without hesitation because they felt like an upgrade. A can you could feel good about. A little touch of healthy luxury that didn't break the budget. But in July 2025, the illusion cracked wide open. The FDA announced a major recall tied to these very brands, and the reason wasn't a small misprint on a label or a dented can. It was the lids. Those easy-open lids everyone loved for their convenience turned out to be defective. And defective lids don't just mean air sneaks in. They mean you could be staring at a can that looks completely fine, smells fine, tastes fine, and yet inside is a silent killer. Botulism. If you've never heard of botulism, let me put it this way. It's not like regular food poisoning that leaves you hugging the toilet. This bacteria paralyzes your muscles. It can shut down the very system you rely on to breathe. And the worst part? You won't know. No smell, no taste, no warning. One spoonful in your salad could be enough to put you in the ER fighting for air. That's how dangerous this is. Now here's the part that made shoppers furious. The companies knew there were issues with the packaging and shipping process. They knew there was risk. And still, they stayed quiet until the FDA stepped in. Think about that silence. While customers were tossing these cans into carts, feeding them to kids, making quick dinners after long shifts, the people behind the brands were betting you wouldn't notice. Because fixing the problem would cost them more than ignoring it. That silence feels like betrayal. And it stings even more when the name on the can is Trader Joe's. For so many Americans, Trader Joe's is the symbol of organic, healthier choices, the store where you don't have to second-guess the quality. Seeing it listed right alongside Van Camp's and Genova made people realize no brand is untouchable. If even Trader Joe's can slip this badly, who can you trust? And that's the real takeaway here. This isn't just about a defective lid, it's about trust and how fragile it is once it's broken. A label that promised authenticity and health turned out to be just another mask covering profit-driven shortcuts. A can that looked like the smarter choice turned out to carry the same risks, maybe even bigger ones than the cheap stuff people thought they were avoiding. So ask yourself, the next time you pull a shiny olive oil tuna can out of the pantry, will you look at it the same way? Or will you remember that in July 2025, the FDA had to step in to protect you from a risk no one bothered to tell you about? And if Trader Joe's, the poster child of American organic, couldn't guarantee safety, what about the next name on this list? Because that one is even more familiar. The one we grew up with, the one sitting in more American kitchens than any other. Star-Kissed. Top 2, Star-Kissed. Now let's talk about the one name almost every American has trusted without question. Star-Kissed. For decades, this brand was practically synonymous with canned tuna in the United States. But here's the shocker. The U.S. Department of Justice actually fined Star-Kissed $100 million for colluding with competitors to secretly hike prices. This wasn't a slip-up. It wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a deliberate scheme, and every dollar came out of the pockets of ordinary shoppers who thought they were just buying dinner. That's why this one stings so much, because StarKist wasn't just another tuna brand. It was America's tuna. The cans were in college dorms, in lunchboxes for office workers, and even tucked into care packages for American soldiers overseas. Parents stretched their grocery money with StarKist. Kids grew up with it. For many families, those blue and yellow cans felt like a dependable friend that never left the pantry. Nostalgia is powerful, and StarKist cashed in on that power for years. But here's the reality today. While the price tag went up, the quality went down. Customers describe opening a can only to be hit with a sour smell that doesn't feel like fresh fish at all. Some say the meat falls apart into mushy flakes that barely resemble tuna. Others claim they've bitten into fine grains of sand mixed into the fish. Think about that. Sand. Inside a product you've been trusting since childhood. What should be a lean, protein-rich food now feels like a gamble every time you pull back the lid. So how did this happen? StarKist didn't need to win customers with flavor or freshness anymore. They already had something stronger, habit. People kept buying StarKist not because it tasted good, but because it was familiar. It reminded them of home, of childhood, of hard times when a cheap can of tuna meant dinner was on the table. The company leaned into that emotional safety net. They knew nostalgia would do the heavy lifting. They could cut corners on quality, quietly raise the price, and still count on millions of Americans dropping cans into their carts without hesitation. That's why this story is bigger than one brand. It's about how trust and memory can be weaponized against consumers. StarKist turned decades of loyalty into a business model built on shortcuts. They weren't just selling tuna, they were selling a feeling. And now that feeling has been betrayed. So let me ask you, when even America's tuna can play games with your wallet and your health, what does that say about the rest of the aisle? If a name as iconic as StarKist has been exposed for exploiting the very memories that made it beloved, can the next familiar brand really be any better? Because the next one, Bumblebee, has its own story. And trust me, it's not a pretty one. Top 3. Bumblebee. Next up is a brand that feels like it has been sitting in American kitchens forever. Bumblebee. For years, the sight of those cans gave families a sense of security. But the shock came when more than 31,000 cases of Bumblebee tuna had to be recalled. And the scandal doesn't end there. This is the same company that went bankrupt in 2019 after being caught up in price fixing and shady deals. It was bought out by foreign owners, and ever since, what's inside the can has changed in ways loyal customers can't ignore. Because here's the truth. Bumblebee used to mean comfort. For many families, it was the can you could count on during hurricane season when storms knocked out power. It was the quick meal parents whipped together during tough times when money was tight. It was the can kids saw in the pantry and knew dinner was safe. Nostalgia wrapped itself around Bumblebee like a blanket, making it more than just tuna. It was survival food, family food, memory food. But open a can today and what do you get? A smell that's less like fresh fish and more like watered-down cat food. Meat that falls apart into mush instead of solid chunks. Liquid that carries a strange film across the surface. People have even measured and estimated that what used to be nearly pure tuna is now maybe 70% fish. The rest made up of fillers you didn't sign up for. Think about that. You're paying full price for a product that isn't even the product you thought it was. And here's the part that cuts deepest. Bumblebee never admitted to the change. They never explained why their tuna no longer holds together. They didn't tell customers when the recipe shifted or when fillers started sneaking in. Instead, they relied on the power of routine, the idea that you'd keep buying Bumblebee because you always had. The logo looked the same. The name was familiar. And for them, that was enough. Why invest in quality when people are already programmed to trust the brand? It's the same old story. A company banking on loyalty while cutting costs and hoping nobody notices. But people are noticing. And when families realize the tuna they thought was part of their storm prep kit or their safety net during hard times has quietly become a watered-down imitation, the sense of betrayal is sharp. You're not just losing flavor, you're losing trust. So here's the question. If Bumblebee, a brand tied so closely to the idea of family resilience, can slip this far, what does that say about the others? Because next up is a company that sells itself as friendly, even wholesome, with a smiling mermaid on the label. But behind that cheerful image, there's a story that will make you question whether Chicken of the Sea is really the friend it pretends to be. Top 4. Chicken of the Sea. Now let's talk about a brand that hides behind one of the friendliest faces in the supermarket aisle. Chicken of the Sea. At first glance, the smiling mermaid on the label looks harmless, even comforting. It feels like she's promising you a taste of the ocean itself. But the shock hits when you look past the logo and see the facts. This is a product that is tested at sodium levels pushing 360 milligrams in just 2 ounces, a number that can quietly raise your blood pressure and strain your heart if it's part of your daily routine. On top of that, mercury levels in some cans have been found hovering right below the safety threshold. And let's not forget the recalls, including one tied to pieces of metal discovered inside. Suddenly, that smiling mermaid doesn't look so innocent anymore. For a lot of people, Chicken of the Sea has been wrapped in the glow of nostalgia. The name itself brings up images of blue waves, sandy beaches, and the kind of summer freedom that makes you feel young again. The mermaid sitting on that can has always been a comforting presence. She whispers of freshness, of nature, of something gentle. People bought it not just for tuna, but for the feeling of calm it represented. But open a can today and reality feels much different. Instead of firm, flavorful chunks, what you often get is a watery mush. Instead of a clean taste of the sea, you taste salt. Too much salt. And when you flip the label and see that a small serving already packs more than 300 milligrams of sodium, it becomes hard to ignore what that means for your long-term health. High sodium diets are tied to heart disease, strokes, kidney problems, and yet this is what many families keep in their cupboards thinking it's safe just because the packaging says so. The truth is simple but ugly. Cheap tuna comes at a price, and that price is your health. Chicken of the Sea built its reputation on affordability, but affordability has turned into a trade-off. The company has given you less real tuna and more water, less quality and more risk. They leaned on the pretty image of a mermaid to distract from the fact that what's inside the can no longer matches the promise on the outside. And customers who once trusted that symbol now find themselves paying with more than just money. They're paying with their peace of mind. So here's the question. If even a heritage brand like Chicken of the Sea can slide downhill this far, what does that say about the newcomers? Are the so-called next-generation store brands actually better, or are they just repeating the same mistakes with fresher labels? Because the next stop takes us into that territory, with a name that sounds clean, safe, and modern. Good and Gather. Top 5. Good and Gather. Target's private label. Finally, let's talk about a brand that looks as innocent as a lullaby but hides behind the thickest mask of all. Good and Gather, Target's private label. On the surface, it seems designed to make you feel safe. The name sounds like family, the packaging whispers wellness. The whole image suggests quality without fuss. But the shock hits when you look for the basics and realize they're simply not there. No species listed, no fishing region, no testing data, nothing that tells you where this tuna comes from or what exactly you're putting in your body. That kind of total lack of transparency is a red flag waving right in your face. For so many families, Target has been the fun shopping trip. Parents grab clothes, kids get snacks, everyone leaves with something that makes them smile. Good and Gather slid into that trust like it belonged there. The soft fonts, the pastel colors, the soothing name made it feel like you were buying something that had already been vetted, something curated just for families like yours. It felt safe by association. But then comes the moment of truth. You crack open the can and instead of clean, solid fish, you're hit with a heavy, fishy odor that clings to your fingers. What's inside doesn't look like chunks of tuna at all, but broken scraps swimming in cloudy water. That's not the picture of quality Target wants you to believe in. And when you realize there's no label telling you what kind of tuna you're eating or whether mercury levels were even tested, you can't help but wonder what else is being hidden. And here's the ugly explanation. This is marketing at its purest and its most dangerous. A mask. The company leaned on the power of design, of branding, of trust in Target itself, instead of building that trust with real quality inside the can. They sold you a feeling wrapped in pretty packaging while giving you something that doesn't hold up to the promise. And once you see through that, it's hard not to feel cheated. Because when it comes to food, especially seafood, the absence of information isn't an accident. It's a choice, and it's one that puts the burden back on the consumer. So here we are. We've pulled back the curtain on 5 brands, and the why picture isn't pretty. Cans that once meant safety, tradition, affordability, and even comfort have been exposed as shortcuts, betrayals, or just flat-out risks to your health. And at this point, you might be thinking there's no hope left in the canned tuna aisle, that maybe it's all rotten under the lid. But here's the good news. Not every brand has given up on quality. Not every can hides a trap. There are still at least 2 names that deserve a place in the American kitchen, 2 brands that prove canned tuna can still be safe, honest, and worth trusting. After hearing about 5 brands that turned trust into betrayal, it would be easy to feel like the whole canned tuna aisle is a trap. But the truth is, not every company has sold out. There are still a few names that refuse to play dirty, brands that put safety and honesty before shortcuts. They don't need fancy packaging or fake promises because what's inside the can actually speaks for itself. And in a world where food often feels like a gamble, finding even 2 trustworthy options is like finally being able to breathe again. Let's talk about them. Safe Catch. In a grocery world full of secrets and shortcuts, Safe Catch feels like an oddball, almost too honest for its own good. Most tuna brands rely on shiny labels and happy slogans that make you feel safe without ever proving a thing. You see phrases like premium or Mediterranean style, and for a second you relax because the package tells you what you want to hear. But Safe Catch doesn't bother with that game. They do something much more old-fashioned and rare in today's food industry. They tell you exactly what you're eating, and they back it up with hard numbers. Every single fish that goes into their cans is tested for mercury. Not random batches, not 1 out of 1,000. Every single fish. That means if you pick up a can of Safe Catch, you know exactly where you stand. And in a time when recalls and hidden risks feel like a constant headline, that kind of certainty is worth more than flashy branding. What you get inside the can is simple, just tuna. No fillers, no soy protein, no mystery oil, no strange liquid that makes you wrinkle your nose. They use a slower, lower heat cooking method that locks in moisture and keeps the meat firm, so when you open it up, it actually looks and tastes like fish. It doesn't hit you with a chemical smell, it doesn't fall apart into mush. You can flake it with a fork and see the difference. It feels like what canned tuna was supposed to be all along before the industry decided shortcuts were more profitable. Of course, there is a catch, and it's right there in the name. Safe Catch will usually cost you more than the big names sitting on the shelf. And for many families, that matters. When you're used to tossing the cheapest can in the cart without a second thought, paying extra can feel like a burden. It might make you wonder if it's really worth it, especially when other brands seem good enough. But here's the uncomfortable truth. Sometimes that extra dollar is the wall between you and an invisible risk. Mercury poisoning is not a stomachache you can walk off. It's something that builds silently in your body, affecting the brain, the heart, the unborn child. That isn't the kind of gamble anyone wants to take just to save a few cents. And that's where Safe Catch changes the conversation. Instead of asking you to trust a slogan, they offer you actual trust. Instead of selling nostalgia or banking on habit, they give you something you can feel safe serving to the people who matter most. Pregnant women, people with heart conditions, parents trying to protect their kids, anyone who simply doesn't want to play roulette with their health. When you open a can of Safe Catch, you're not just feeding yourself. You're making a choice to value your safety over someone else's shortcut. And in today's food market, that is almost revolutionary. So yes, it costs more, but when you realize what you're getting back in return, the price tag feels smaller. It's not just a can of tuna. It's proof that honesty in food still exists, even if you have to look a little harder to find it. And maybe that's the biggest relief of all. Because when you finally crack open a can of Safe Catch, what you taste isn't just tuna. It's peace of mind. Wild Planet, skipjack line caught. Not every can of tuna is meant for everyone, and Wild Planet proves that right away. If you're used to oily tuna packed with flavorings and heavy seasoning, this brand may not hit the same way at first. It's not the kind of can you rip open and instantly recognize as the salty, oily mush that most big names sell. Instead, it looks cleaner, paler, even a little unfamiliar. That can feel like a letdown in the beginning, especially if your taste buds have been trained to expect all the extras. But give it a second, and you realize what makes this brand stand out. Wild Planet isn't hiding behind flavor tricks. They're showing you what tuna is supposed to taste like before the shortcuts took over. The difference starts with how they source their fish. They only use skipjack, a species naturally lower in mercury, and every can proudly tells you that. They don't stop there. They print the fishing region, the method, and yes, even the fact that it's line caught, one fish at a time, instead of giant nets that scoop up everything in their path. That kind of detail might seem small, but it's what separates Wild Planet from the companies that refuse to tell you anything at all. When you open a can, you see thick chunks of tuna that hold together, not watery flakes that collapse the moment you touch them. You smell a light, natural aroma instead of a sour, fishy blast. And when you take a bite, you realize you're tasting tuna itself, not tuna disguised by oil and additives. Of course, this honesty comes with its own challenge. The flavor is different, and sometimes different feels wrong. If you've grown up eating heavily processed tuna, Wild Planet might taste plain the first time you try it. It's not masked, it's not dressed up, it doesn't hide behind layers of salt or spice. Some people even say it feels too mild, almost bland compared to what they're used to. But that's not a flaw. That's the point. It's the flavor of fish that hasn't been stripped, stretched, or rebuilt in a factory. It asks you to taste tuna the way it actually is, not the way marketing departments have trained you to accept. And that's where the real value comes in, because once you realize what Wild Planet is offering, it doesn't feel bland anymore. It feels honest. It feels like a brand that trusts you enough to show the product without disguises. You can season it the way you want. You can build it into meals without worrying what fillers or scraps were hidden inside. It becomes not just food, but a choice, a statement that you prefer real over convenient illusions. For people who care about mercury levels, sustainable fishing, and the simple act of knowing what they're eating, Wild Planet isn't just another option on the shelf, it's the rare reminder that canned tuna can still be exactly what it claims to be. And maybe that's why, once you get used to it, it's hard to go back. Because the truth, even in something as simple as a can of tuna, has a taste all its own. Canned tuna used to be one of the most dependable foods in the American kitchen. It was cheap, it was filling, and it carried the kind of comfort that came from knowing it would always be there when money was tight. But that simple trust has been shaken. Recalls linked to deadly bacteria, price fixing that squeezed families without them realizing, and fillers that turn fish into something unrecognizable have all revealed the cracks. The lesson is clear. Not every can deserves your confidence, no matter how familiar the label feels. And that brings us to the real message. Even the most ordinary, budget-friendly food can betray you if you stop paying attention. The brands you grew up with are not automatically the ones you should trust today. Yet it's not all bad news. There are still companies like Safe Catch and Wild Planet that prove transparency and safety are possible if you're willing to read beyond the marketing. Look closely at the species, the fishing method, the mercury data. These details aren't decoration. They are the difference between being fooled and being informed. So now it's your turn. Have you ever bought tuna from any of these brands? Did you notice the taste, the smell, or maybe even something worse? Comment below and share your experience, because silence is what allows these companies to keep getting away with it.